Welcome, everybody. I am Paula Ludwig with the Atlantic Institute. I am in West Columbia, South Carolina. For those of you who weren't in when I asked where you're from, if you'd like, you can put in the chat where you're from. This just helps my boss realize that we still need to do these programs virtually because people from all over the states as well as the world are attending these programs, which I am very grateful for. The Atlantic Institute is a nonprofit organization that is about being exposed to different cultures, religions, just having conversations about these things. And one of the programs that we do is this Cultural Creations. We also do one called Cuisine of Different Cultures, and you can check us out on our website, Atlantic Institute, South Carolina. Or if you're one of our Eventbrite people, we have many programs that I've already put the events out there for as well. And go ahead and sign up for those. We still have people coming in. I am going to show a short video about the Atlantic Institute, and then we will turn it over to our instructor for the day, who it looks like it's going to be a fun one. So, all right, let me do that. I'm going to wait just another minute or so. I apologize. I still have people coming in. All right. Yes, Jen H., you are very right. The pandemic would have been an even longer and lonelier time without Zoom. I totally agree with you. Yes. Unfortunately, part of my family, my mom and my grandmother, they don't have internet even. And so I wasn't able to, I mean, I can always call them, but I wasn't able to have face-to-face conversations with them yet. So I'm not sure they'll ever get it. They live in the middle of nowhere in northern or middle Michigan. So, but yes, I agree with you totally. All right, so I am going to now turn this on my video. I'm going to share my screen. And why? There it is, the green button. And share sound.
The Atlantic Institute is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting harmonious coexistence between peoples of various cultures, faiths, and backgrounds. We seek this goal through peaceful dialogue, education initiatives, and community organization. Our dialogue events bring together experts, community and faith leaders, and knowledge seekers to address social issues that affect us all. We feel dialogue is the most important element in peaceful coexistence, so we try and maintain several panel discussions, TED Talk events, and book clubs throughout the year. These events touch on social issues, race relations, and cultural understanding and are a mainstay of our programming. The Atlantic Institute's education events are extremely important to our mission of understanding. We want to promote socially forward critical thinking to students of all ages. To that end, we have developed programs that seek to grow the creative spirit of students and help them think about their communities and the world around them. Our Future Leaders of Dialogue event brings together nominated elite students to learn from each other as well as political and business leaders. Our art and essay contest gives students a theme about important societal issues and allows them to create wonderful works of art and writing while steering their minds towards improving their world. We are always seeking ways to educate youths and adults in order to make a peaceful world for all of us. Our community events are designed to transform neighbors into friends and groups of people into a community. By associating with other nonprofits or by our own initiative, we are always trying to discover new avenues to improve our neighborhoods, places of worship, and community centers. We host cooking demonstrations of food from other cultures, work with various nonprofits to help elevate the work of others, and try to find a way to make the lives of those who are disenfranchised or marginalized better. Building a more peaceful world starts in our backyards, so we are dedicated to improving our communities and associations. The Atlantic Institute is always seeking like-minded volunteers and collaborators. If you would like to learn more, find volunteer opportunities, or just want to chat with our staff, please visit our website at www.atlanticinstitutesc.org or follow us on Facebook. We will never run out of fun, educational, peaceful events, so come join us to help make this world a better place full of understanding and unity.
This is my pendant.
All right. I want to thank you all for attending. I am now going to turn this over to our instructor, and we are going to learn how to make these chunky pillows.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today. My name is Kate. I'm from Comfy Sunday, and today we are going to be making these chunky knit pillows, which I absolutely love. There's the front. It has that beautiful, almost looks like a flower, and even the back is kind of cute too. So hopefully you've got a few things with you. Definitely chunky chenille yarn is the best. That's my absolute favorite thing to work with. And some polyfill, which you can find at most craft stores, which is what we're going to use to stuff it inside of this. I have taught a lot of these workshops, including the chunky knit blanket workshops. If you've taken any of those before or made any chunky knit blankets on your own, it's a similar stitch that we're going to use if you've used the finger stitching. We're just going to use smaller loops since you don't want the polyfill to pop on out. So you do want a nice tight knit that you're working with. So if you have any questions along the way, again, my name is Kate. You can throw your questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, if you have a question, it's just like school. I bet someone else in the class has the exact same question. They're just too shy to ask. So I also used to be a school teacher. You can't ask the same question too many times or in too many ways. I want you guys to be able to complete today having one of these adorable chunky knit puffs, perfect for this nice fall weather that we're finally having, at least here in Nashville. All right, so I am going to switch my camera on over so you guys will see down, you'll see my hands. I'll be here the whole time. All right, so to get started, grab your ball of chunky chenille yarn. I've got this spa blue color that I'm working with. And this is going to be basically 3 main stitches. We are going to have our starting row and then the body of our pillow. And then our last stitch is going to be how we're going to close our pillow up. All 3 are very easy. I would just suggest a couple of things. Number 1, make sure you are working on a nice flat surface. If you are doing this in your lap or even on a bed that's too soft, your pillow is possible, but it's not going to look its best. So I love working on a nice big table. It doesn't even need to be that big if you are cramped for some space. The second thing I would say is for a craft like this, it's less forgiving than if you've made one of those chunky blankets. So you do want to make sure that you are focusing on keeping your loops organized and nice and small and tight. If you are a type A person, this is going to be your favorite thing ever. All right, so to get started, grab your ball of chunky chenille and find the end. Sometimes it can get really tucked in there. Excellent. And I've got my end right here, and I'm just going to give myself a little bit of working yarn right here. And I'm going to create a letter C kind of with a very long tail, maybe even longer than that. And it has this little loop right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a slip knot. I'm going to do it once and then I'm going to undo it and we can do it together. All right, so I've got my C, I've got my end, and all I'm doing is I'm taking this with the tail and I'm flopping it over. So it makes almost like a fish or a breast cancer awareness symbol. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to come from underneath the table. So now my fingers are through the loop and pointing up. And I'm going to use these fingers and I'm going to pinch this yarn right here. And with this freehand that I have, I'm going to brace this extra material right there so it doesn't go anywhere. So I'm going to take these fingers and I'm going to pinch this yarn and I'm going to hold on to it. So I'm bracing with this hand, got my fingers up pointed towards the sky, and I'm going to pinch that yarn and I'm both hands going to pull, and it creates what we have here is a slip knot. And these are really cool because they're actually adjustable. So if it's too large, you can simply tug on one of the ends and it'll shrink it up, or you can tug on the other end and it will make it larger. For this craft, we are going to go pretty small. So we are going to make them probably, that's about 1.5 inches or so, with a nice long tail that we have here. So I'm going to undo this and we can do it together. However you learn best. If you want to copy and repeat or follow along, it is all good. And this seems simple, but it's actually a point that throws a lot of people for a loop, no pun intended. So shout out if you have any questions. If you even want to pop your camera on, you can show me what you're working on and where you might need some extra help. I am here to help you. This is your time. All right, so I'm going to do my slip knot. I've got my yarn. This is the end of the yarn. I've made a little loop right here. And all I'm going to do is simply flop that on over the top. Now I'm going to use one hand. I'm going to come in. So my fingers are pointed up towards the sky through the loop. I'm going to pinch this working yarn here. And with my free hand, I'm simply going to brace it at the top. So I'm going to pull at the same time with both. And I've got myself a slip knot. I'm going to adjust it because that's a little too big. So I'm going to pull on that and I'm going to shrink it down pretty small. You only want to be able to fit probably 3 fingers across comfortably, depending on the size of your fingers, but you want it to be on the small side. So congratulations, you actually completed one of the steps that just confuse people. So if you crush that step, then you are going to do a great job on this pillow. If you are confused, if that's totally sent some, smoke through your brain, just throw it in the chat. I can do it again. I can always go back. However you need to learn so that you've got a beautiful pillow at the end of this class. I'm here to help. All right. So what I'm going to do is we are going to do our first row, which is casting on. And this is going to be a different stitch than we're going to do for the other parts of the pillow. So this is just our starting row to get us going. So we are going to do 12 loops that create a braid. So I'm going to do them and then I'm going to unravel it and come back to this step. So I'll do it once and then I'll go back to where we are now so you can watch and do it with me later. All right, so again, I'm going to grab this loop. I'm going to take my fingers and put them through so they're facing up towards the ceiling, and I'm going to grab this working yarn. The yarn that's connected to the ball, that's what we consider the working yarn. And this is my extra guy. And I'm going to pinch that working yarn. And with my free hand, I'm going to be holding onto this loop just to kind of brace it. I like to work even on a firm table in a line. So I'm just going to pick that up through that loop just a little bit, tiny. Again, that's probably 1.5 inches or 2 inches. And I've just made a little loop. I'm going to stick my fingers back through that loop and I'm going to pinch this working yarn and I'm going to use my free hands to support everything else, keep it all neat and organized. And then we just made a second, or I guess considered that a third one. So I'm going to stick my fingers through, pinch that working yarn. You can see as I do it, it kind of moves around. That's what your free hand is for. Keep it straight and in a line. And you can see it's almost starting to make this braided look, which turns out really beautiful. So you can also notice that you can't see through this. You cannot see the table. If you are making this, and we're going to do 12 of them, if you want to keep on going, if you start to see your working area underneath it, I would unravel, which is super easy to do. You simply tug on it and it goes back in time. If you can see through, I would unravel and try and do it even tighter, so that you cannot see the table. That's going to make for the best looking pillow. All right, so we're going to stick our fingers through, we're going to pinch this working yarn and we're going to pull up. Now I'm going to stick my fingers through, pinch this working yarn, use my free hand to brace and pull up. All right, so we're making a nice little braid. So I'm just going to go back in time. For those of you that have that step down, you can go to about 12, including this guy was 1. And so I'm going to start over again. So I'm all the way back to the beginning. I have my slip knot. This is my working yarn. I'm going to stick my fingers through and they are up to the ceiling. And I'm going to pinch this working yarn, free hand. I'm bracing it so it stays still. And I'm just pulling up a little bit. I like to stick my thumb through and that's kind of what pulls up, but whatever works best for you. All right, and I've made my second one. So let's go for 3. We're gonna stick fingers through, pinch that working yarn. And again, we're going small. We're going very small. So we're gonna do that again. And we're gonna keep going down the line, through, up, and then stick your fingers through, pinch, pull up, do that till you get to about 12. And if you've done it and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea where I am in terms of my count, you can count these little braid humps right here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've done 7. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get to 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Excellent. If you have 13 or something, I think 13 would be just fine. I wouldn't go any smaller and I wouldn't go too much larger. That'll change the shape of your pillow. So what we're going to do is we've got our first braid down. This looks fantastic. And obviously we are knitting now in a straight line. We want to knit a puff. So we are going to make this go in a circle like this. And this free yarn that we have here, that's the end, just for a little placeholder, stick this free yarn through the loop that you just made, and it kind of will pull it in together. Don't pull too tight. You don't want to adjust or change anything. You just want to make it so that it's close. And it's kind of holding that loop so that loop doesn't collapse on us or go anywhere. So if you don't have a chunk of working yarn that's loose from your ball, I would unravel some. So this is what you're working off of. It makes your life so much easier than having to constantly unravel the ball of yarn as you go. Also, if you are pulling from the ball of yarn and that's what you're using, it's going to make your stitches tighter or looser depending on how you're pulling it, and it'll change the look of your stitches. And so you always want to be working off of this free, stress-free yarn over here. All right, so we've got our braid right here. It's in a circle. We took our end of our working yarn, the end of it, and we stuck it through that loop we just made, and we're just going to keep it over there to the side, and you can forget about it for now. So we are moving on to doing a different stitch, which actually creates the body of your pillow. Once you do this a few times, you're going to get it down, and then we are going to do this for actually most of the pillow is the rest of creating the body. So take a second to orient yourself, find these humps on the outside of your braid. That is where we're going to stick yarn through. So I've got my very first one here, and you can see the hump, and right underneath it is a hole, a tiny little hole. That is where you're going to stick I like to stick 2 fingers through, and these are almost like pinching this yarn, is how we're going to do it. So I'm going to stick my fingers through, and I'm going to grab this working yarn, and I'm trying to get this as close as possible, this working yarn, and I'm going to pull up with my fingers, and then I'm making a very tiny loop. That thing is probably 1.5 inches or so. It's not even a big enough loop that you can actually see through it. It's kind of still touching. And then we're going to leave it there. So before we were taking our loops and continuing down our braid, we are now making loops, and we're going to keep them there. So we just did this one. Now you find the next braid hump, and that's where you're going to stick your fingers through, and you're going to pinch that working yarn and pull up and then away from you. So we've just made a second loop. And if you haven't guessed, we're going to keep on doing it. And what's great about working on a nice smooth surface and working on a circular project is you can keep turning it as you go. It makes it faster and makes it easier. So you are going to find your next braid hump. Right underneath it is a hole. You're going to stick your fingers through, and you are going to pinch the working yarn, and you're going to pull up and away from you. Keep them nice and small, and keep on going all the way around your circle, making sure that you're not missing any opportunities to put loops in there. That will create a gap in your pillow that could, it'll be like a little bit of a hole, and some stuffing could pop out, and it just doesn't look as a nice uniform pillow as it could be. So you want to make sure that every time you see that braid hump, you're going to go right underneath it, and that is where you're going to put in the working yarn. So you should have depending on exactly how you knit, about 12 of these. And you can see where you started. That was the yarn we put in. So you want to go all the way to where we started. And now the next loop that we should do is the one with as the string through it. So you're just going to very gently pull that back out. That was our little placeholder. Excellent. All right. And now we are going to make sure that we connect them. So the very next loop, we are going to stick our fingers through, and we are going to do the same stitch, pull that material up and away from you, tiny little bits, and you want to keep on going. So now we want to make sure that we are doing it inside of every loop that you see. So you can forget about that braid part. Now we've built the loops, and we're basically using the loops as our guide. And we're going to do this for about 3 rows or so. So we just did row number 1. So let's do row number 2. So we're starting row number 2, and we know that we're starting because this is where that slip knot is. So stick your fingers through and pull that material up and away from you. And you're going to go all the way around, and this is row number 2 that we're working on. Stick your fingers through. Pull some extra yarns, make sure you got it right next to you. Find that next loop. Make sure you don't miss any loops. Any missed loops could unravel, since this pillow is a series of loops and they're all kind of interconnected. You want to make sure that you hit them all, because if one gets forgotten, it could unravel and go all the way back. So I'm actually talking and mine are getting too big. You can see there's actually a hole. I'm going to simply unravel and go back one. If that happens to you, it's worth the time. Even if you see it like 4, loops back, it's worth the time to just quickly unravel and redo. Keep them really nice and tight and snug as you go. All right, we are about finished with number 2. All right. Excellent. So that was 2. And I know that because here's my slip knot with the tail on it. And so now we're going to do 3. This will be our last row that we're going to do for right now. And then I'll show you a little trick to make it even easier. All right. So we'll go around one more time. Maybe that's smaller. I'm going to shrink it a little. All right, I'm almost there. All right. I have reached the end of my 3rd row, and I know that because here's my little slip knot, and that would start the next row. So we are going to make sure everything looks nice and even. And now we are actually, you can stick that yarn right in the center right there, and you are going to do a little sandwich fold. So I like to put my hands on either side and just squish it and then flatten it. So what you want to have is you want to have your loops facing away from you. So this is where that braid was at the beginning. My working yarn is over here, or I'm sorry, that's the end of the yarn. My working yarn is right in front of me, and I've got my loops sitting in front of me. So you can see these loops have spaces in between them. We want to make sure that for the rest of the pillow, we close them up so they're nice and tight. So this is the loop I just did, and it has the working yarn through it. So same stitch, we're just doing a little bit different process, or orientation, I should say. So I'm going to stick my fingers through that next loop, and then I'm going to pinch that working yarn, and I'm just going to pull it through. So you can see it's creating loops that are closer together than the ones next to it. And what I like to do is pick up half the craft. My thumbs are in between in the center of the circle, and I'm just rotating it a little bit. And so I'm finding where my last one was. It was right here. And so now I'm going to keep going, find that next loop, pull through, keeping them pretty small in terms of size. And then when you get to the end or before, you want to kind of rotate it every, 4 or 5 loops. You want to pick your craft up and rotate it. This keeps the loops next to each other as tight as possible. All right, and you are going to keep doing this. We are going to go for about 12 rows, and I'll show you. You can see it's sometimes it's a little difficult to see, but if you look closely at your craft, you can see these little rows in here. Each one of those is a row that you've done. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm on row 5 right now. And you want to go to about 12 will be great. If you go more than that, you will have more of a rectangle shaped pillow. If you want a round puff like the one I showed you at the top of class, I like to do 12 rows. It's pretty good. And this makes a nice little mini puff. All right. So we're just going to keep on going. Till we get to about 12 or so. If you have any questions, if you're not sure what's going on or where to put the loops in or your sizes, just give a shout. I'm going to keep on going to 12. Gets really nice and relaxing once you get the hang of it. If you haven't made one of our chunky knit blankets, but you are enjoying this process, you would love a blanket. You should, you can use, it's a very similar stitch. Perfect for making holiday gifts. You can start to see it taking shape too around these rows are probably around 9 or so. I'm going to do another 1 or 2, pause and count. I have a ball of yarn, and typically industry standard is about 28 yards. I am using jumbo as the size. It's very thick and chunky yarn. I love it. And actually, we won't even be using the whole ball of yarn with these little mini pillows. You'll have some extra. You could probably make a mini pillow with what you have left over. All right. I'm gonna pause and count, just see where I'm at. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, just making sure. I know that this is 10 because I see down here a little slip knot. So I must be starting 10. Get myself more yarn. I see my working yarn. I'm ready to slip knot down here. So this will be 11. Let's just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to just flip this one more time all the way around, and then I'll show you guys how to close up the bottom. It's actually really satisfying. All right, last one. All right, here's my slip knot, and there is mine. So that is perfectly aligned to where we should stop. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my craft and I'm actually going to flip it up. So this is the bottom. Technically, it is where we started. And so you've got the hole, and then you've got your free yarn. So what we're going to do is take a look at these humps around the mouth of this, and you want to go from outside in. So find the next over mouth, and you want to take your yarn and you want to go from the outside to the inside and pull. So you're pulling towards yourself, and you don't have to tighten it or tug, just kind of put it through, and then find the next portion of that braid, and you're just going to go from the outside in and pull and find the next one. If you skip one, that's okay at this step. It won't make or break anything. You don't want to skip too many of them, but go from outside in. Okay, and now I could probably keep going, but I'm going to see where I'm at. So you've got your string, you've done the outside in, and you're going to tug at it, and it starts to close up that mouth. And actually, that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to keep tugging. You can see it closed it entirely. You can't see it at all, which is fantastic. Excellent. And so now what I'm going to do is take one hand and go underneath my craft. So my finger poking through. I'm going to take this free yarn and I'm just going to use that finger kind of like to hook it in so that you can gently pull that strand all the way through. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my craft over. So now you're looking in. And this is, well, that's my working yarn. This is the string that's attached to the bottom. So you are going to, it's a little hard to see sometimes, so you kind of have to feel around. So if you take a look at where your string is, it's on one side of that hole. You want to find a stitch on the other side with your fingers. And you want to take this and you want to put it, you're basically tying a knot loosely, very loosely around that stitch. It's very hard to show on camera, but hopefully you get the hang of it. So your string should be on one side of that hole. You're just going to find a stitch on the other and you're just going to loop it around there so it's tied. It's nice and closed. You cannot see through that very much at all. Okay. So now we've got, now that kind of like adds the extra fluff. We've got our chunky knit pillow hanging out. I have a ton of extra yarn. We are not going to need all of it. So give yourself probably a foot or two. You won't even use all of that. And you can trim the rest. Excellent. So now grab your wonderful polyfill, little white fluffy stuff, and you're going to put it down. And when I put it down, I like to spread my fingers out at the bottom and it kind of fills that cavity. So just keep filling it and squishing it down. You want to make sure that none of these loops are coming out. You're not tugging or pulling. You're still keeping it nice and structured. And you can almost, see your little poof coming to life. So if you kind of hold down where your loops are, you can feel that's what it's going to look like. That's what it's going to feel like. I want it to be a little more firm. So I'm going to shove in a little more. And I may even add a tiny bit more, but for now, that's great. So I actually didn't even cut enough. This is way too much. I gave myself definitely 2 feet or 3 feet even. So I'm going to trim my yarn at the end. So I've got just about, let's say that's a foot. So you can see your most recent loop that you did and the string coming through it. You want to go down in the next direction, go down the line, and you are going to take this working yarn and you're going to find this very next loop, and it is going to go from the outside to the inside, just like we did to close up the bottom, and tie very, very gently. Don't pull tight. So then you're going to find the next loop and you're going to go from the outside in and pull it towards you and go all around the circle. Definitely don't miss any of these loops as you go around. We're going from the outside pulling in. You want to make sure that you always use that same direction because it will close it up really nicely. All right, I'm on my last one. Pull through, and now it's really satisfying. Brace you have the string in one hand, you have that most recent loop in one hand, and then you can tug and it closes it up. You can pull pretty good. And it makes a really nice little closing. And then what I like to do is I'm just gonna make sure it's nice and closed. And I'm gonna use my thumb. Now I'm feeding that extra material in. And it actually gives it some extra puff. Before you get to the end, you do want to do a little knot. I don't think your project is going anywhere, but if you can actually make this knot as close to the end as possible, or make yourself a knot and then trim the little, ponytail that's left, that works too. And you don't have to do this step, but I feel like it looks nice. So you can give yourself, you can kind of, these pillows, you can shape them a little bit if they're a little wonky. And I like to feed it through, and then you can either have it so that you have a little center into your flower, that is the knot you just made, or you can pop that all the way through. And then what I also like to do is these, it almost looks like a flower around the center. I like to tug and pull them gently up and towards the center, and it kind of, makes it pop a little bit. So you've got, this actually looks really great too. You could display your pillow in both ways. Adorable little puff. If you happened to stain this, spill some chocolate on it, you don't want to put this in the washing machine because your puff, the polyfill will pop out. So you want to make sure that you spot clean, or a little trick is that if you're working with chunky chenille, I love working with this material, because all you need to do is wherever you spilt a little bit of chocolate, you can simply give it a little trim for wherever you spilt that and cut that off, and then simply just brush it and it puffs right back up, and you can't even tell where you gave that a little trim. If you have a little leather label, you can affix that in between a couple of strands of yarn, wherever that makes you happy. They're just for little accents. If you are into, and obviously you have the little rivets to affix it. If you're into essential oils, you can actually drop some lavender oil onto your leather little strand there, because leather is a natural diffuser. It turns your pillow into like a little sleep pillow. So there you go, a cute little mini pillow puff. All right, I hope you guys love them.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun to make.
Anybody have any more questions? All right, so this video will be on the Atlantic Institute SC YouTube channel. Hopefully by Wednesday, the person who does it for me is a volunteer, so when they can get to it, sometimes it'll happen today, sometimes it won't happen till like Wednesday, but hopefully it'll be out there by Wednesday. If you want to go back and you can play play it and pause it as you go and that kind of stuff. Thank you, Kate. This was awesome. It looks super simple, easy. They look like this really expensive, hard project, and yet you sat there and did it in 40 minutes, and with your fingers even. You didn't even need special tools. So that is awesome. I know we've also put a link in the Eventbrite, and it'll probably be out there for a little bit longer. If you want to just go and buy them everything you need for one, there's a link for that through the organization that we did this through. Yes, she was a wonderful teacher. I agree, Tanya. Thank you. I am going to stop the recording now, but we will be here for a couple more minutes if you would like to ask questions or anything.
Hi, I have a question. If you wanted to make the same exact project and then even expand like on sizes eventually, would you be able to do the exact same steps just as you did, but maybe just add more to the 12?
That is correct. Yes, you definitely can. You could go for maybe 15 on your starting braid and 15. It's kind of like a testing process, because sometimes it turns into a very boxy looking pillow if you get to have it too long once you do that closing. And unfortunately, you really only find out once you've completed it and you're ready to close it, what your final project is going to look like. So it's a little bit of an experiment. I like teaching the mini puffs just because they're pretty guaranteed. 12 and 12 will turn into a great looking size. But yeah, you can absolutely make them slightly larger.
Okay, thank you.
How big do you think a skein of yarn would go?
I've got a good amount left. So you could definitely go to 15 and 15, if not more. I think you could probably go more than that. The going from 12 to 15 doesn't sound like a lot, but the body and the rows do take up a good chunk of yarn. So usually a ball of yarn is about 28 yards. So also it depends on exactly where you're getting your yarn.
Okay.